Like Japan's own video game industry, the Final Fantasy brand finds itself facing the proverbial crossroads. Thanks to a change in fan taste as well as a switch in the seat of gaming power to the West, the days when either commanded the world's undivided attention seems to have come and gone. This makes the Final Fantasy X and X-2 Remaster Edition the equivalent of a nostalgia tour. Unlike has-been bands that invite pity and sorrow, however, this remaster is more akin to the Rolling Stones. Yes, Mick Jagger and Keith Richards aren't quite the spry young devils they used to be, but boy can they still put on a show. For fans of Japanese role-playing games, Final Fantasy X and X-2 Remaster presents a twofer, packing HD editions of two titles in one. There's Final Fantasy X, which some would argue is the last traditional game in the series, based on its turn-based battle system. Then there's its Charlie's Angel-style follow-up Final Fantasy X-2, which focuses on its three female leads. Although plenty of HD versions of old games are content to do a simple upscale and call it a day, Square Enix actually put some effort in the remaster's graphics. This is especially evident in the character models, which received a substantial facelift. In contrast, the backgrounds didn't quite get as much love, making them stick out like a sore thumb and feel dated in some cases. Overall though, this collection does a great job in bringing up both games up to snuff visually for HD displays, like my ginormous 83-inch TV for example. Story-wise, Final Fantasy X holds up pretty well. I dare say I still find its story to be better than the Final Fantasy XIII series for example. Despite not being a fan of his look, I also find Tidus to be one of the more likable protagonists in the Final Fantasy universe. He may be a bit of a ditzy beach boy for some, but I'd take that any day over an insufferable emo. I swear a lot of these dramatic lead characters in anime, manga, and Japanese games could use a bright slap. Just Google it and you'll know what I mean. The turn-based combat also feels like a familiar old friend, though if you've never been a fan of the turn-based combat before, this likely won't change your mind. But a bright slap might. Whoopsh. Players who missed out on extra features such as the Expert Sphere Grid and Dark Aeon bosses will now be able to enjoy those as well. Final Fantasy X-2's story, meanwhile, still remains as kooky to me as it was when it first released, especially with its cosplay vibe. The actual gameplay, however, remains fun thanks to a solid battle system, as well as extras like the Creature Creator. The Remaster Edition also throws in extra story content, as well as the last mission for extra insight into the overall story. Overall, Final Fantasy X and X-2 Remaster provides series vets a great opportunity to revisit its world and newcomers to experience it for the first time as well. It certainly shows a bit of its age, particularly with its backgrounds and the clunky feel of moving through some of the dungeons. Combat remains nice and tight for both games, however, and continue to be enjoyable even after all this time. If you enjoy old-school Japanese role-playing games, then Final Fantasy X, X-2 Remaster still got the moves like Jagger.